I was doing a storyboard, and the room was filled with my crew and so forth, and he got in a coughing jag, and his face turned red, and he kind of bent over, and I said, "For gosh sakes, Walt, why don't you give up smoking?" And he says, "Well, a guy's got to have a few vices, don't he?" Something like that.
He didn't look good. He didn't feel good. He just seemed to be almost permanently grumpy. The word around the lot was that, well, he's not feeling too well.
I always saw him on this long corridor. He was walking and limping. And I said, "Gosh, you look as though you're in pain, Walt." He said, "No, it's nothing." He said, "No polo injury. I've got to go and have my back fixed."
And I remember he said, "I'm going to, I'll be going, I've left the hospital now, and when I'm going to go to Palm Springs, and we'll set up down there, and we'll have meetings out there. You guys can come out to Palm Springs."
I have a rather expressive face. If somebody's saying they're going to get their back fixed, and he's the god of all men, and he says he's going to have his back fixed, it means going to ruin his back for him. And I'm going to lose him. I said, "God, a back?" He said, "Oh, come on, Peter, don't get me concerned about it."
He was going to have surgery on the back of his neck. That was set. They were going to fix this problem that the old polo injury was causing. And my mother came to my door one morning. She said, "They took an x-ray of your father's lung and they found a lump the size of a walnut."
Walt, the optimist that he was, felt he was going to lick it. He said, "It's one of these things. I've smoked all my life, and I've seen people who have smoked all their life and they didn't have lung cancer. I thought it would never happen to me." And it happened.
Nobody let us in on it. Maybe some of the inner circle might have known it was more serious, but I didn't. And then one day, we were looking at a rough cut of this film, and Walt was there in the hall. And as he passed us in the hall, we were standing there, he looked at us and he said, "Keep up the good work, fellas." It's the first time and the only time he ever complimented our work. And he winked at us and walked down the hall.
Then we turned to him and said, "Are you worried about going to the hospital?" And Walt said, "You're damn right I am." And we thought he was going in because of his old polo injury, but that wasn't it.
I was in front of a camera, just like now, and he appeared just to the, it was to the left, to the camera right, and I saw him. He looked very gaunt. He looked very thin, and his suit was just hanging on him, and it shocked me. Since he was just behind the camera, I realized that he had seen my almost distressed look. Actors have a way of knowing how they react to things. And I walked over to him trying to cover my reaction. I said, "Walt," I said, "how's your neck?" Because we had been told he was across the street in the hospital for a study of his neck or something to do with a vertebrae. And he said, "Neck hell, they took out my left lung."
They were all there sitting in the room. And the surgeon came in after the surgery and he said, "Well, it was just as I suspected. The tumor had metastasized. I give him 6 months to 2 years." Of course, it was like dropping a bomb in that room.
I felt that there'd be some doctor flown in from maybe Europe or some specialist. I never dreamed that Walt Disney would die. I didn't think they'd let him.
To me, the most poignant story of this whole last time is his last visit to the studio lot. Just looking at this place that he had built, these people that he brought along, done these amazing things, and knowing he had to leave it all behind.
And then he stopped about 20 feet away, and he turned And he said, "Goodbye, Mark." But he never said that to anybody before.
Roy Disney explained to me that he, his last visit to Walt in the hospital, he said, "I knew I was going to lose my brother then." He said, because here he was talking very excited about the Florida project.
Roy would get up very early in the morning and go to see Walt. And Walt always complained about his feet being cold. So Roy would stand there and rub his feet and get them warm.
And as we got off the elevator on the floor, and I saw Ron go striding into Dad's room and then come out with his arms up like that, as though someone had pushed him back. And when we went into the room, I mean, Dad, you know, his hands were on his chest, and he was gone, and Uncle Roy was standing at the foot of his bed, and he was massaging one of Dad's feet, just kind of caressing it, and he was talking to him, you know. And I don't know, it sounded like something like, "Well, kid, this is the end, I guess," you know, and that sort of thing. And I saw his love as I've never seen it before.
I was next door at the studio, and I rushed over, and he was gone.
Well, I tell you, I never cried when my dad died. See, I did when Walt died, and I'm darn near close to it right now.
I cried in my wife's lap.
It put an end to a marvelous era.
And I lay awake all night long. I couldn't sleep.
We knew that he was sick and was over in the hospital there, but nobody knew how really sick he was. I remember the day he died, John Hench came back to my office, and we were reminiscing and about the old days, because most of the people there didn't know Walt, hadn't had a chance to work with him, and we were talking about it, you know, and it was on the 15th of December. I remember very vividly, because that was the day I usually went out and bought my Christmas tree. So at noon they said we're closing the studio, closing Imagineering, and I remember going home and I did stop and get my Christmas tree, but when I got home, it really hit me, and I just sat in my room and I just bawled like a baby. This was just. The man is gone, you know. I just cried and cried and cried.
When Walt died, it left a big hole in all of our lives. He was a friend, a close friend in many ways, and yet he always distanced himself from everybody else. He was a genius. He lived his own life in his own mind, in his own heart. But he couldn't help but affect all the rest of us very deeply. And even though he had not been working with us closely for 5, 6, 7 years, it was still a devastating moment, and the whole world changed as far as we were concerned. And you kept thinking back over those days when you'd worked so hard, all of us, Walt included, trying to capture something rare, something new, something unique in the entertainment business.
We all gathered in Bill Anderson's office, a whole bunch of us, and they were crying, and men were crying, I was crying. It was terrible, it was horrible. It was just horrible.
Someone called me at home and I rushed out to the park just in time to see the flag go down on Main Street, which was a chilling moment. And when I walked in, all the employees were kind of in a state of disbelief. The word had gone out that Walt would probably have wanted the park to be open, so we were struggling to keep the park open that day.
Well, we lost the spirit. It's what's really sad. The day that Walt passed away, everybody that worked for Disney Studios or any part of Disney felt they worked directly for him, and so everybody lost him. Everybody did. It was horrible. It was absolutely horrible. And so, you know, you didn't have a father image. You didn't have a leader anymore. I mean, it was horrible. It was absolutely horrible because I don't know, there was just something about him that when you came to work, you were going to work for Walt. You know, you just weren't going to work you weren't going to a job. You were going to work for Walt. And I think he was in everyone's heart. And so it was horrible. It was horrible. It's like Ollie Johnson said, and most of us did. They cried all night. Sad.
I went down to get my hair cut, and it was a gal barbershop. And she was cutting my hair, and she says, "Too bad about Walt." And I said, "Oh, he's going to be okay. He'll be back next week." No, he died. Well, I couldn't get out of that chair quicker to get home, and my mother and my cousin are just like this. They wouldn't even talk to me. Well, it was a bad day.
They announced Walt's passing, and then they cut in Julie London's voice, and she sang the Mickey Mouse Club song. M-I-C-K-E-Y-M-O-U-S-A. I had to pull off the road because my tears were blinding my ability to drive.
Somebody asked me one time about where were you when John Kennedy was shot? And, that was a terrible thing. But to me, when Walt died, it was many times more devastating than that. That's how hard it hit me.
Such a huge shock and such a waste. My gosh, can you imagine how many more wonderful things were inside that man?
The day of his funeral, the day of his memorial service, my wife answered the phone. It was CBS radio calling. They wanted to speak to me. And my wife was able to say, "Ray's not here. He's on his way to Disneyland with the children." And this was planned months ahead. Had nothing to do with the funeral. And when I came home and heard that she was able to say that on the phone, I cried. I was so glad that I had done the right thing without knowing it.
And for at least five or 6 years after he passed on, I think all of us at the studio felt that that he was still there, because I know in some of the meetings, somebody said, "Well, Walt wants this," and Walt was long gone.
And every kid on the planet who's privileged enough to see a movie, a Disney movie, obviously he's a legend that will never, ever die. When he died, it was devastating.
Just an ordinary man with the most extraordinary talent of making you feel that you were important, when in actual fact he was the one.
This was a man that had one foot in the past because he loved the nostalgia and used it in many motion pictures and television shows to get through to the public, and one foot in the future because he loved the technology.
You drop him in a glass of water, and like a Japanese flower, he expands in all directions. So it's the expansive Disney that's moved out in the world in so many different ways and has done nothing but good.
I mean, here is a man who had scant education. His parents were not exceptional people except in their character. He was not much of an artist, but somewhere came this amazing factor of knowing what drama and comedy was, And so I'm afraid we're just going to have to say, well, Walt Disney, genius.